Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Good morning and welcome to it, the Tuesday edition of the Michael Dukes Show. And it is a little chilly burr, 2 degrees down in Homer. This morning, looks like 4 degrees in Anchorage, 20 below up in Fairbanks. A bit of a cold weather spike for a couple areas here this morning around the state. And in fact, down here in Homer and on the southern Kenai Peninsula, there's a cold weather advisory, wind chills as low as 10 to 20 below on the southern Kenai and Prince William Sound, including Homer, Seldovia, Seward, Whittier, and Valdez. Very cold wind chills could cause frostbite in exposed skin as low as 30 minutes and as low as 30 minutes. Also in the northern Matsu, up near northern Matsu, northern Copper Valley and Toe Cutoff, wind chills as low as 40 to 50 below and could cause frostbite in as little as 5 minutes. So stay covered up is what I'm saying right now. But that's pretty much it. It's starting to, I keep saying this, but I think we're on the tail end of this. I think I hope so. 11 below right now in the Matsu, and again, 20 to 25 below, depending on where you're at in Fairbanks right now. It is Tuesday, and you know what that means. It's time for the weekly top 3 with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're going to dive into the madness that is going on down at the down in the legislature, and there is some crazy stuff happening down there right now. So without further delay, let's get into it and see what he has to say. Brad Keithley joins us this morning with the aforementioned Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Hello, Brad. How are you, my friend? What's happening?
Michael, I'm doing great. First of all, I'm glad to know I'm in Anchorage, where it's warmer than Homer.
Than Homer. Well, that's unusual, right?
Yeah, but it's hard to say we're on the tail end of something when we have wind chills in the northern Matsu of 40 to 50 below. Good Lord.
I'm trying to be positive here, Brad. Please don't harsh my mellow, okay? Please do not mess with my groove here. I'm just hoping that, initially all these false spring indicators will eventually align into a real spring. That's all I'm
By June, we'll be at the tail end.
I'm hoping that by June there won't be any snow and it'll at least get above zero. That's my prayer and my hope. This is not the song that never ends. This is the winter that never ends. It seems like for us here. But Brad, we've got it's a mad world out there. It really is. And we've got some crazy stuff going on in the legislature as well. Let's start off with the bill that probably most people have never heard of right now, SB 274. You've got some thoughts on this. Let's dive into this about how this, on the surface, this sounds great because we're talking about reducing the draw on the permanent fund. And boy, this sounds like a great idea. But you say that there are some challenges to that. Let's get in it.
So SB 274 is a bill introduced by the Senate Finance Committee, and which means it's basically Burton Lyman, Donnie maybe, and and the bill is a proposal to step down the POMV draw, which is currently at 5%, the statutory POMV draw, step it down from 5% in the following manner, over a period of 5 years, to step it down to 4.5%. So beginning in FY28, or FY29 rather, step it down to 4.9%, 4.8% in FY30, 4.7% in FY31, 4.6% in FY32, and then 4.5% by FY33, and to bring it down to 4.5%. Now, as we've talked on the show innumerable times, more times than probably certainly the Permanent Fund Corporation Board wants to hear, but more times than maybe even listeners want to hear, we've talked about how the Permanent Fund Corporation's performance has not been equal to 5%, and that we're setting up a situation where first we're drawing down the earnings reserve by taking it 5% when the Permanent Fund Corporation is not earning at 5%, and then potentially either draining the earnings reserve by doing that, or if we pass the constitutional amendment that we've talked about a lot of times on the show to merge the 2-account system into the 1-account system, potentially set up a situation in which we would start to eat away at the corpus of the permanent fund. And so when you talk about reducing the draw on the permanent fund, at first blush, you would think that, okay, this would be a great thing, because now we're getting the permanent fund, the POMV draw, more aligned with what the Permanent Fund Corporation has been earning and is projected to earn, itself projects to earn over the coming years. And so we avoid a situation in which we're draining down the ERA, or setting up a situation if we have a constitutional amendment of eating into the permanent fund corpus. Here's the problem. The problem I see with that. We're institutionalizing, by doing this, by reducing the POMV draw. And this isn't, I mean, people will tell you, Bert would probably say, well, this is a cap. This is, you can draw up to, 5%, 4.9, 4.8, 4.7, 4.6, 4.5. You draw up to that. But it's not really, I mean, what they're really setting up is that sort of draw. And it's institutionalizing, in my view, and I'll write more about this on Friday, but it's institutionalizing the failure of the Permanent Fund Corporation. What you're essentially saying, what this bill essentially says is, yeah, okay, we recognize the Permanent Fund Corporation isn't going to be able to live up to the 5%, and that's a problem, and that we need to correct that problem. And it says we're going to correct that problem by reducing the POMV draw down to what the Permanent Fund Corporation can do. And so you're institutionalizing what I think is the failure of the Permanent Fund Corporation to maximize its returns. You're saying, okay, the Permanent Fund Corporation can't do this over the long term, so we're going to lower the rate of the POMV draw down to the level at which the Permanent Fund Corporation, we think the Permanent Fund Corporation is going to perform. You're eliminating the incentive. I mean, the Permanent Fund Corporation would say, well, we still have the incentive to earn more. But you're really eliminating the Permanent Fund Corporation's incentive to strive to produce more than whatever this return is, because at this return, they achieve their goal of producing enough revenue on a consistent basis for the legislature to spend, for the legislature to take in the POMV draw. And they're sort of done. We've done our job is what
right,
they can
right.
is what they can say at this point. I think a much better approach is the approach that Bruce Tangeman first recommended. Need to give him credit, and that we've talked about on the show for the last few weeks, which is to say that the permanent fund draw, the POMV draw, will be the lesser of 5%, or what the Permanent Fund Corporation in fact has earned over the 5-year period that you're using as a basis for the draw. So that if over the 5-year period you only earn 4.2%, then what you can draw is 4.2%. If, as they've done in prior 5-year periods, you earn only 3% or 2%, then
Right.
that's all you can draw. So you're not draining out the ERA, or you're not invading the permanent fund corpus. But I think that we ought to keep the 5% cap, or maybe even a higher cap. We ought to keep a cap that is if you earn more, then the POMV draw is more, up to whatever that cap is. And that would create an incentive, create pressure, and through pressure and incentive on the permanent fund corporation to stay alert to and to focus on, and would create pressure on the legislature to focus the permanent fund corporation on producing higher returns. Because with higher returns, you'd have higher draws, and with higher draws, you would have a better situation for the Alaska economy. So I think what we're doing here with this bill is good in an initial sense of we are realigning the POMV draw, the POMV percentage, to what the Permanent Fund Corporation has been doing and is projected to continue to do. But I think that that when you sort of get through that and think about what that's doing to incentives, it is reducing the incentive on the Permanent Fund Corporation to press forward for higher returns. And we know by looking at the Buffett rule, the 90-10 rule, or looking even at the Permanent Fund Corporation's own passive index, we know there are higher returns out there the Permanent Fund Corporation could be achieving. And so by passing this bill and sort of capping the level of the POMV draw, we're sort of letting the Permanent Fund Corporation off the hook from having the incentive to go out and produce those chase those additional returns, achieve those additional returns that we know they can achieve.
It's interesting because I think Rob Myers kind of summates what you're saying here in the chat room. He says they're still trying to protect the spend by making it smoother from year to year rather than making it healthier for the fund. And I mean, I think that's in part for sure. And quite honestly, I question the genuine nature of what Stedman is saying here. Oh, this will act like a cap. Well, until it doesn't, right? Until they have to take more than 5, because again, this will be statutory. This is not the constitutional component. This is a statutory component. So when the crisis is really real, they'll draw more anyway. But like you said, it's taking the pressure off the permanent fund to deliver. Oh, and by the way, the permanent fund is still spending almost $1 billion on all these fees and everything else. So everybody's still getting paid. So what does it matter if we don't deliver a great return or not, right?
Yeah, to some degree, the step down to 4.5% recognizes the impact of the permanent fund paying all those fees, paying $1 billion a year in fees, more than 1% in fees, and it sort of institutionalizes that approach by the Permanent Fund Corporation to be paying those fees, to have this sort of subpar, mediocre return going on. It says, okay, well, that's fine. We'll just step down the POMV draw. I think there's one other thing, and Rob has made this point before, maybe on the show, but if not separately, that what we're really doing is this is a backhanded way of wiping out the PFD. I mean, we usually think of the PFD being wiped out by increased spending, but what this is going to do, remember the PFD comes from the POMV draw. What this really does is step down the POMV draw in a way that will preserve the amount that's going to fund government, but sort of wipe out the marginal amount that's been used for the PFD. Now, the PFD shouldn't be calculated that way. The PFD, as it's set up in statute, is a preferred dividend. It's a dividend that's supposed to come before everything else. It's designated funds. But the way we've treated it the last 10 years is a common dividend, whatever common stock dividend, whatever's left over at the end. And by stepping down this revenue source, what you're essentially doing is undercutting the revenue that has supported the permanent fund. Right. Stedman and Lyman won't care about that, but that's another thing we're doing. And again, by institutionalizing that low return, that low POM, the low return from the Permanent Fund Corporation, you're essentially institutionalizing the wipeout of the PFD.
Well, and again, yeah, because that 0.5% that you're talking about is probably the majority of the PFD in and of itself, and maybe that's the intent in the long run, is a slow track down of the PFD when it's all said and done. So on the face, it looks like it may be good, but then when you start digging into it, you realize that this is just more political cover for the Permanent Fund Corporation to not do its job in the long run, while still getting paid, by the way. But we're still getting that $1 billion in nearly $1 billion in management fees and everything else. So, why can't we just get a permanent fund that ties itself to an S&P fund of some kind and really starts generating and just start paying? I mean, why can't we do that? Because we've got people who believe that they know better than we how to spend it.
Yeah, there was a slide in the Permanent Fund Corporation's presentation to both the Senate, House Finance and Senate Finance, where they asked themselves that question, because we've asked it enough that enough people are asking the question that they put it on the slide deck, and they said, well, why don't we just go to the S&P 500? And the slide said something along the lines of, well, we're not chasing headlines, we're chasing rock solid performance. Well, you're chasing deficient performance.
Yeah, you're chasing. I mean, you'll note that while chasing headlines, they're also getting some pretty decent returns compared to what you guys are doing. So maybe you should start chasing some headlines at that point. Wouldn't it be great to have a headline in the Wall Street Journal says Alaska Permanent Fund, reaches new stratospheric heights because it's, matching the S&P. I really don't care about the headlines, but I do care about the performance. All right. Well, that brings us to the break. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. We got more coming up in hour 2. Chris Story is going to be joining us a little bit early. We're going to talk about the latest on the property tax, the Fair Tax Act, and more. We'll continue in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Well, I only mashed the wrong button once this morning, so we're doing good. It's already a great show this morning. Charlie said, and again, I think Rob kind of summates it well here, where again, he's trying to say they're trying to protect the spend. This is all about everything that they're doing is about protecting the spend in the long run. And again, I would not be surprised, Brad, if what they're trying to do is a gentle, gradual phase out of the PFD, because again, that 0.5 percentage point would essentially equate to almost all of the PFD draw at this point.
Yeah, but to give Bert credit in this small respect, they're not phasing it out in a way that preserves the revenue that formerly supported the PFD. They're not phasing it out in a way where that revenue goes to spending. By reducing the POMV rate down to 4.5%, they are essentially keeping that money in the fund as opposed to letting it leak out to spending. Of course, this is statutory, assuming they observe the statute and all that sort of stuff. But we need to give him that credit. But I think what's going on, I mean, I will characterize it this way. What they're saying to themselves is, look, Permanent Fund Corporation isn't going to get there. They're not going to get to 5%. So we got to phase it down. And it's okay that we phase it down, because all we're really giving up is the PFD. And we don't really care. This is Burton Lyman. We don't really care about the PFD anyway. So it's okay that we phase it, that we recognize the Permanent Fund Corporation. This is what the Permanent Fund Corporation is going to do. And it's okay that we're going to recognize it, because we're not really taking that money out of spending. We're taking it out of the PFD, and the PFD is expendable in any event.
Yeah. Donna says, yes, Stedman wants the draw reduced so he can wipe out the PFD. That's thing. Charlie asks, so how would your proposal be worded if this was you running? What would you do differently in this case?
Well, Tangiman, I've got a commentary 4 weeks ago, I think, in the Landmine, and Tangiman had one in front of that, like the week before that essentially said it's the lower of 5% or whatever number you want, but lower of 5%, or what the actual rolling average return was over the 5 years you're using for the basis for the POMV draw. So it's a simple language, lower of. And so what that says is, look, if the Permanent Fund Corporation, and what that creates is the incentive for the legislature to say, look, Permanent Fund Corporation, you got to get up to 5%. You've got to maintain that 5%. You got ways to do it. And we're not going to reward you for letting it slide down to 4.5%, because we can take that 5%. We can take it as a dividend, or we can take it however we want to. So it creates that incentive, that pressure, if you will, legislative pressure on the Permanent Fund Corporation to continue to maintain a 5%, which would require them to do something different than they've been doing, because they haven't been maintaining the 5% over the last several periods.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. In other words, says Kim, the public knows the PFD is going away, so let's just accelerate it going away even more. I mean, again, I will be totally shocked and surprised if next year there really is any kind of PF. Now, I guess it all depends, and we're going to get into this in the next segment. It all depends on what happens with the Iran war, what happens with oil prices, what the legislators do here in the next few weeks with the proposed oil prices and everything else. But I think overall, I'm still sticking by the statement that I'll be totally surprised and shocked if we get a PFD next year.
Isn't that a horrible thing to say? Isn't that a horrible thing to admit? I mean, it's just, alas, we can't control our fiscal situation enough to give the citizens their share of the commonly owned wealth. We can't. Right. We the legislature, are going to give up trying to do that.
Yeah,
we failed, and we're just going to admit failure, and we're just going to wipe it out.
Yeah, no, it's but it is what it is, and I think, Brad, they don't even feel bad about it, because again, they know better than us how to spend this money. That's the disease. That's the disease.
Well, that's part of it, and part of it is they're all in the top 20%. After they gave themselves the raise, they're all in the top 20%. Yeah. So the PFD to them means very little.
Yeah, it's a nothing burger to them. To everyone else, it's something real. All right, we got to jump back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show.
Here on the Michael Duke Show, our libertarian talk means that both the elephant and the donkey gets mad at us, pissing everyone off equally. Mission accomplished. The Michael Duke Show.
That's right. Everyone hates us. But I can live with that. I drink a haterade every morning, right before the show. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, continues with us, his weekly discussion. We call it the weekly top three big topics that affect us each and every week here in the state. The second part, number 2, are the AK LNG's dynamics changing as a result of the Iraq war? Of course, we're seeing a lot of the headlines. Straits of Hormuz, Qatar has shut down its gas. I mean, Qatar produces 20% of the gas on the planet, and they've shut down their facilities. And even if it's just for a month, the ripple effects of that are going to be amazing. And Glenfarne has said, hey, let's make hay while the sun shines. Brad, what's going on?
Yeah, we'll talk about oil prices in the third segment. This one's about LNG, and I've had more people than I would have thought send in questions or texts or calls and say, well, isn't the Iran war going to result in isn't that going to push the AK LNG project forward? Here's the response I've given to that, and I think is the correct one. If the Iran war, if as a result of the Iran war, Qatar's LNG making capacity was obliterated, if it was, if the LNG export facilities were targeted and wiped out, if the field in one of those fields they share jointly with Iran, if the fields were set afire and the productive capacity of those fields were materially altered, then yes, I think there would be some knock-on consequence for other LNG projects. And the Alaska LNG project is somewhere in the stack in terms of costs and in terms of characteristics, is somewhere in the stack. And so if you wipe out 20% of the LNG production capacity in the world, you're going to, have to replace that with a different 20% someplace else. And Alaska might be caught in that stack. But that assumes that you wipe out Qatar's productive capacity and you set the fields ablaze and you can't restore that productive capacity in any sort of timeline. If all that's going on, and it looks like this is all that's going on, everybody's sort of pulling their punches. Iran and the other countries are pulling their punches when it comes to fundamentally destroying the oil and gas productive capacity over there. If all that happens out of this is there is a time period during which Iran or Qatar is taken offline, and it takes a time for Qatar to come back, if that's all that's going to happen, no, there's not going to be any knock-on consequence. We're not going to have to replace 20% of the capacity of the LNG making capacity out there in the world in order to bring it on. Now, people might say, "Oh, but Alaska is safer, and all these other places are safer, and now we've known that Qatar is risky, and so we need to go to those safer places." That lasts for about 3 seconds because Qatar is cheap. The productive capacity in Qatar, the huge fields over there, very low cost to monetize those fields because of the scale. And so, okay, Qatar is risky, but we always knew that. We always knew Qatar was in the Middle East. We always knew that Qatar had to go through the Straits of Hormuz. We always knew that there was some potential out there at some point that Qatar could be taken offline. But it was people invested in it. People entered into contracts with them, knowing that risk was there. Okay, now we know there's a little more risk because we've seen it once. But if that risk is fairly constrained in time, price is going to overcome everything else. Alaska is much more costly than Qatar. People aren't going to go out and invest in Alaska if they know that Qatar is coming back. They're not going to go out and say, "Oh my, there's a risk premium somehow, and so we're going to invest in Alaska." And I mean, because when Qatar comes back, it's going to knock Alaska offline. It's going to knock all of those more expensive sources offline. So why are you going to go invest in a project in a country that's going to be more expensive? Why are you going to invest in it when it's going to get knocked offline from an economic standpoint, in a fairly short order? Right. The world's already seen this sort of condition on the LNG side. When Russia invaded Ukraine and the Europeans all decided to go off Russian pipeline gas, we've seen the price spikes that occur when you take a bunch of gas offline. I mean, Russia was providing more than 50% of the gas of Europe's gas at the time that the Ukraine war hit. And when Europe decided to go off Russian gas, take the dollars away from Russia that were going to pay for the gas and ultimately going to pay for the Ukraine war. When Europe decided to take Russia offline and not use Russian gas anymore, prices spiked in Europe high, but they come down because the world found alternate sources to be able to accommodate that. I mean, Russia was taken offline permanently in the sense that Europe said, "We're not going to buy any more of your gas." But the world found alternative sources of supply, particularly in the U.S. Gulf Coast, that brought those prices back down. So we've seen, price spikes before, and we've seen that they're temporary, right? As a result. So when people say, isn't Qatar going to, make the Alaska LNG project go? No, it's not. I mean, if the Alaska LNG project goes, it's going to be because, as we've talked before, the U.S. government and other governments decide that it's like it's a strategic asset from a war standpoint, and they'll be the ones investing in it.
Right, because again, the big challenge here is about timing and timelines, right? The Qatari may go offline for a period of time, and it may cause it to spike, but their ability to turn it back on and turn it back around in 60 days versus 3-4 years for Alaska gas to be able to actually make it to the export market. I mean, that's a pretty rapid timeline, 3 to 4 years, is part of the problem. And Bruce Tangeman, who's in the chat room today, says, and close to Tidewater, a $20 billion 800-mile pipe is Alaska's biggest hurdle. That's another plus on the side of the Qataris, is their stuff is right there at the water. So, yeah. So this is, it's all about timing and how long would it take to get it back up or on. So there is a little bit of a bright spot, but it's not the Hail Mary that everybody seems to think it is.
Yeah, and Michael, it's not a year. I mean, we're not looking at year time frames. So even if Qatar was going to be off a year, even if it was going to be off 2 years, it wouldn't really press Alaska forward, because Alaska is a 20, 30, 40-year payout. I mean, you're investing money in the expectation that you're going to pay it out and get your profit over 20, 30, 40 years. So it's not, I mean, and so you have to assume that Alaska stays online, stays economic, and is able to achieve those margins over that sort of time frame. So even if you were going to knock Qatar off a couple of years, you wouldn't automatically shift to Alaska. You would just take the price spike. You would hope that the Gulf Coast of the U.S. Gulf Coast steps up. There's a couple of U.S. Gulf Coast projects that have been mothballed because the economics aren't great for them. They might be resuscitated to come in and provide some additional supply. But you're talking about time frames. You're not talking about 6 months. If Qatar's off 6 months, oh my gosh, all of a sudden Alaska is going to go. Qatar would have to be off permanently. You'd have to be saying, okay, they've knocked out all of the liquefaction facilities. They've knocked out the port. They've torched all the fields. It's going to be nearly impossible to get those fields back up to the same productive capacity. Qatar's gone. You'd have to say that, and then you just have to say, okay, how are we going to fill this 20% hole in world demand as a result of Qatar being gone? You'd have to say that in order for the world to move on to the less economic projects that are sitting out there in line. And that's not how this war has gone, at least so far. Nations seem to be pulling their punches. Yeah, they'll bomb the occasional refinery, or they'll bomb the occasional, luxury hotel in Dubai, but they're not unlike what Saddam did in Kuwait at the end of the Kuwaiti War, where he torched all the fields. We're not seeing that sort of scorched earth policy adopted.
Right. And I know that you and I have been not negative. I mean, I like to say that I'm hopeful, but not optimistic about the AK LNG line. I'm hopeful that it could, if we find some way to make it happen. But again, I ain't counting those chickens until they're in the coop. And that's kind of where we're at right now. They're just, I don't see how financially we could make this work. I mean, they haven't even produced we still don't know what the final number is, right? The FID, we still don't know what the final investment number is. And apparently we're not going to know. It's supposed to be this month. They're supposed to do it, but we're not going to see it. So there's no way to really know what's going on with that.
Yeah, this is Jerry Maguire. This is show me the money. Show me the money, and I'll start believing in this project. But there's been no money. I mean, there's been no. We've had a bunch of contracts, heads of agreement announced. We've had a bunch of potential orders for EPC for equipment, whatever the hell EPC stands for, construction. We've seen a bunch of preliminary contracts entered into for that, but we've not seen investment on the line, large scale investment to pay for all these contracts, to pay for all these things that we have preliminary agreements on. So, as the movie may be dated now, Jerry Maguire may be, beyond whatever age class we've got listening to the program, but there was a line in that movie that said, "Show me the money, and then I'll believe." Right. And that's where we are with the AK LNG project. Well, and the money's not going to show up as a result of Qatar.
Right. And even as Brian says, as if Alaska doesn't have its own risk, and we didn't even get into this. I mean, Kathy Giesel and company in Senate Resources now is putting together a bill that would basically politicize and to have the legislature take control of the whole thing at this point. I mean, if you think that they're inept and there's a lot of bickering and schoolyard tactics going on now, wait until they have control of the LNG project, right?
Yeah, this Giesel's bill reminds me a lot of what happened during the Palin administration with respect to the line to the lower 48. Remember, we were going to build a line from Alaska down to the gas line down to the lower 48 because the lower 48 was running out of gas. And the Palin administration came in, and I can't remember the acronym for that bill, but they had this bill that, you know, required bidding for the pipeline and all this sort of stuff, and had all sorts of tax provisions. And we had long debates about whether the state should take its gas in kind or take its royalty gas in kind or take it in value. We had this huge bill that came out, didn't do anything. I mean, we spent another X hundred millions of dollars with TransCanada because they got awarded the contract, and the state agreed to part of the contract was the state would pay TransCanada for what, Gia, thank you. Whatever the TransCanada was doing, the state would pay for it. But it reminds me, Giesel's bill reminds me a lot of that process that the Palin administration went through. It's just, you know, a lot of churning, a lot of, oh my gosh, we got to do it this way. We got to do it for a project that's never going to go.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, and if you want to scare off investors, nothing scares off investors faster than a government saying, oh, we'll take control of this and we'll make it easier. Nothing makes investors grab their pocketbooks faster than something like that. So we can talk about that during the break, but we're up against it. We've got to go. Brad Keithley continues with us, the weekly top three. We've got one more to go on this. And then next hour, Chris Story's coming in. He's going to come in a little early, and we're going to talk about his Fair Tax Act. And then we're going to get the life coaching lesson from him as well. Back with more of the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Yeah, this bill, when you get down into it, the Alaska Story actually wrote two stories about this. One, it just kind of gives you the bare bone facts, and the other one basically just says, has Kathy Giesel lost her mind? Essentially is what the second story says, because that's and what happened to her. I mean, she used to be, well, I mean, this is the same chick that did the ad with her husband and his wallet on the table about stealing the PFD. And now she's like totally become one of the pod people. And now she's all about, look at all the stuff we could spend this money on if we need. I mean, what's going on down there, Brad, in your mind? You look at this. I mean, what triggered this where we need to take over everything and have legislative approval and the legislative budget and audit committee will oversee everything, and like that's ever worked out well?
Yeah. Remember they hired these consultants. Remember that we went through this whole cycle where they hired the consultants that turned out to be a subsidiary of the EPC contractor for their project.
Yeah, right.
So we got these consultants, and, you know, consultants have to consult. And consultants have to, you know, justify their existence by making recommendations. And we had a whole slide deck worth of recommendations that the consultants made about what, you know, the state should do to protect its interests. And it looks like, to some degree, I haven't gone back and compared slide bullet point X with, you know, section X of Giesel's bill. But it looks like the consultants' recommendations got turned into legislation, and so, hey, you know, we had a project, we had consultants. The consultants advised us to do certain things, and, you know, we're supposed to do what the consultants tell us to do. So we've turned that into legislation. But it's all truly reminding me, And thank you to Rob for reminding me of what the acronym was. It's all reminding me. Alaska Gas Line Inducement Act. That's what it stood for. It's all reminding me of sort of late stage project. I mean, in what decade was that? Oh, it was the 2000s. That the producers had worked hard on coming to agreement with the Murkowski administration on exactly how they would govern the line to the lower 48 and the economics of the line to the lower 48. This is before the shale revolution and the gas revolution that came with the shale revolution. There was a period of time that the producers really believed that the Alaska Gas had a role to play in the lower 48, and they put together this project and they all agreed on it, and they worked with the Murkowski administration and they had an agreement on it. And then Murkowski flamed out. Palin came in and she had to change it all. She had consultants and she had to change it all. And in the meantime, the project just died. The economics behind the project died. And it was just sort of fun to watch all of this late stage, legislation and
it's fun
gyrations that went on.
It's fun to watch until you realize that it's, we're in the middle of it. That's the thing, it'd be one thing it's one thing to watch the train wreck from outside and be like, "Ooh, that's spectacular." And then realize, no, you're in car A when the thing comes off the rails. And that's a whole different way to look at it. And that's kind of how we've been here in Alaska. We're watching the train wreck, but we're on the train while it's happening. And that's the worst part, is you just can't get away from it.
I've got to say, that bill really has, Giesel's bill has two big components in it. One is, the first half of it is really how does the legislature control, or how does the state control the LNG project? And the second half of it is tax, how we tax gas and royalties and the like, and how we're going to set all that up. And, in my X number of years in Alaska, one thing I've learned is simplicity is important. Simplicity in tax is important. Simplicity in government regulation is important, because the complexity of it will just wear you out and make you do other things. Even if it's well founded, just complexity itself will drive you away. And the last half of that bill, the tax sections, it's just one complexity after another. Yeah. I mean, all of it, I sit there and I go, okay, well, why would they do that? Okay, I understand what they're trying to incentivize. But it's like what SB 21 has turned into. It's one complexity on top of another complexity. And what that produces is an unpredictable result. I mean, what we've got with SB 21 now, I don't think anybody sitting there in 2013 and 2014 foresaw what stacking all these credits on top of themselves would do in terms of driving down the state's take. And it's the complexity itself that is undoing the benefits of SB 21. And that's what the tax provisions in Giesel's bill look like to me.
Well, exactly. And all you're doing is discouraging external investment in these kind of things, the more complexity. But again, it goes back to the syndrome of, we know better than you how to do this. We've got to show that we're taking care of it and we're taking charge and we're doing it. That's the problem with government in general, is that is their nature, to go ahead and take control of those things to show that they're doing something. And of course, by doing something, they're creating more hurdles to the market and everything else. And it's a hot mess. All right, we're going to jump into number 3 here. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable, the fastest 2 hours in radio. Let's get to it. Here we go.
As Michael always says when he's tucking me into bed, no man's life, liberty, or property is safe while the legislature's in session. Oh, wait a minute. That was Mark Twain. Oh, well, still true, though. Michael Dukes, we only steal from the best.
Absolutely. And we only attribute it to him one time, and then from then on, it's something we've always said. That's how it works around here. All right, the Michael Dukes Show continues. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Number 3. Brad, why should we ignore the spring revenue forecast? That's the. I mean, we could see it coming. We could see it. I mean, Gary Stevens's comment the other day, oh, this is really tragic and all this loss of life and destruction. But guess what? We're going to make a lot of money. It's great that we're going to make a lot of money. We can already see there's some problems here. Why should we be ignoring the spring revenue forecast?
The spring revenue forecast, the Department of Revenue spring revenue forecast, which is the basis on which the legislature finishes up the then current fiscal year, the supplementals for the then current fiscal year, and then the budget for the initial budget for the subsequent fiscal year. Spring revenue forecast is based upon the average price in the futures market over a 10-day period prior to the time that the spring revenue forecast is published. And we're currently in that 10-year period. We're currently in the period that
10-day period.
Yeah, 10-day period that the Department of Revenue is calculating this average for both 2006 or 26. We're in 26, 2026, FY26 and FY27. You know, Aegea, it always got me going back and forth between decades. But we're currently in the 10-year period. I keep on my desk one computer that's dedicated to oil matters. And I've got oil prices flashing up during the day, flashing up in front of me. And just from the start of the show, oil prices have gone from $94, which is where we were. Well, maybe that was like at 5:30 a.m. when I was getting up and getting everything set up. Oil prices have gone from $94 down to now $87 for the front month. For FY27, prices have gone from, we were about at $75 or so, $76. Now we're at $74. I mean, these prices are bouncing around all over the place.
Right.
And yes, mathematically, you can take the average from this 10-day slice and say that's the forecast that we're going to use. But it is as arbitrary and as unpredictable as anything can be when we're in the middle of a war that's affecting oil prices. So I think we're just setting ourselves up for huge problems. Maybe not with respect to FY26, maybe not with the end game of FY26, because we're only using the last 3 months of the futures of the fiscal year, the futures prices for the last 3 months to sort of figure out what the FY26 average price is going to be. And maybe right. That makes some sense. But to use the futures price for FY27 to set the budget up based upon whatever the heck those 12 months, the futures price in those 12 months are during this 10-day slice, it's just setting us up for all sorts of problems.
Yeah. Well, listen, this we've always talked about that the problem with the budgeting process is that we are always betting on the if come. We're always betting on some kind of future amorphous thing that's really nothing more than a best guess. And even in times like this, you'd think that the Department of Revenue would say, well, we usually do it in this time frame, but there's a war on, and that's a really extraneous, kind of thing, and that's going to really blow these numbers apart, and they're not going to be true and accurate. But no, they're going to do. This has been part of our problem the whole time. Why aren't we betting it on, an average of the revenue from the previous 5 years? Why aren't we using some kind of weighting to go, this doesn't make any sense,
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of a usefulness to revenue doing this. I mean, you sort of want to have, I mean, you want to look at 10-year forecasts, you want to look at 5-year forecasts, you want to sort of see where you're heading. And the best way to do that is the futures market. And there's, you got to do it at some point. So it's not a bad thing to do. The problem is budgeting on it. The problem is saying, this is the revenue we're going to have and we're going to depend on in setting up the budget. And it's just, I mean, it's wild that we do it even during normal times, because even during normal times, there can be stray events that cause those prices to get way out of whack.
Right.
We know right now that we're not in normal times. So I understand. I'm not arguing that DOR shouldn't do it, because there's a usefulness to having that projection, but it shouldn't be the basis on which we budget.
Right.
We should if we're ever going to do it, now's the time to go to what other states do, what Oklahoma and New Mexico do. I wrote a column, last Friday's column in the Landmines, all about this for those who want to dig into it. What other states do, which is to use either averages or to use some mechanism that normalizes oil prices based upon historical levels, and then shoves the rest of it into some sequester account that you then can use when oil prices are below that level.
It's not like this is happening in a vacuum either. We can just go back to look at Parnell's administration when they used an oil projection of $105 a barrel. By the time he got to doing the budget, it was down to 70, and he's still factoring it at $105 a barrel, right? This is not like it hasn't happened before. We haven't seen the danger of this. That's what started this whole merry-go-round off, by drawing out of the CBR and those $3 billion draws to pay for this kind of stuff because of this kind of factoring. We got 2 minutes here, Brad.
Well, no, we absolutely. So we know that we're going into a screwy period. We know that these prices are going to come from a screwy period. And we know that they are unlikely to reflect where we're going to be over the course of fiscal year 2027. We know that. And so we ought to take that knowledge and apply that in how we budget going forward. And the best thing we can do is to go to historical averages. I mean, that's what Oklahoma does. It's what New Mexico does. It's what Wyoming, North Dakota. I mean, you look around the rest of the U.S., nobody is doing it like we're doing it. You look around the rest of the globe, nobody does it the way we do it. Nobody predicates their budgets on the projection of oil prices. So we ought to step back. Since we know that we're going to be off using these numbers, we ought to step back and use a budgeting process that's tried and true and been used in other states and other places around the globe.
Bruce Tangeman he almost gets the final word today. The legislature will most likely ignore the DOR report and come up with their own number based on 1, their fiscal year 27 budget, and 2, $1,000 PFD, and then back into an oil price to make it all balance. That's sad. That's just kind of where we're at right now. Final thoughts, Brad, 1 minute.
Well, that explains why Alaska is where it is.
I mean,
we're not using, and Bruce was a legislative staffer at one point to finance. We're not using tried and true budgeting practices. We're using made up, spur of the moment rationalizations of how we want to get to our budget. We're not using a process that produces a good, solid outcome. We're just making it up as we go along.
No, we know better than how the system works. We know better than all these other people. We'll figure it out. We're going to make up our own stuff, and it'll all work out just fine. Yeah. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, thanks so much.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Hour 2 dead ahead, the Michael Dukes Show, Common Sense Radio. Rob just said, we've been told that Senate Finance will use $68 oil this year. Mm-hmm. I mean, if that turns out to be okay, then that's great. That's great. I mean, they're playing it safe, which is all good. But the problem is that's this year. We need to stop this back and forth every year and start looking at it from a long-term perspective where the legislators can't you're right. Okay. So they could have decided to do 68 this year, but they could have decided to do 88 this year. Right.
Or Brad? 72 or 72 or 70 or 75.5 or
pick a number. Yeah. I mean, they politicize the whole process. There's no grounding in reality. It's just whatever the hell they feel like it. And that's the problem that we're talking about. Right, Brad?
Yes. I've never heard a Senate finance hearing or a House finance hearing, or even an administration talk about how it's done in other states, talk about how, other states who are confronted with the same issues we are in terms of having this volatile commodity producing a material part of their revenue stream. I've never heard a hearing that sort of goes through what others do and sort of tries to develop best practice for Alaska. It's always and it's out there. I mean, I tried to do it in the Friday column to a degree. There's stuff out there that people have thought through and applied, basic fundamental financial policy in trying to public finance policy and trying to develop these mechanisms that work and become tried and true and predictable and understandable and simple and that sort of stuff. We don't do that in Alaska. We just sort of make it up as we go along. 68 today, 65 tomorrow.
Right. Well,
and we wonder why we run into these issues that we're running into. We wonder why we can't observe the permanent fund dividend, the preferred nature of the designated nature of the permanent fund dividend. It's because we're just making this shit up as we go along. Yeah. And we run ourselves into these dead ends where, the only thing we can do is sort of steal money from somebody else.
Well, and Brad, this is indicative of Alaska's legislature and the leadership overall. It's not just with oil and gas. I mean, look at the Alaska Reads Act. I mean, it worked in Mississippi, and it took us 6 years to finally force a bill through to show that, because we knew that it worked. We saw that it worked. If they've looked at other states, but see, then they wouldn't be able to ones to say, look at what we did. We knew exactly how much better we were than anybody else to do it. It's that whole idea of we know better. I mean, it really, truly is a sickness, in my opinion.
It is. And it, at least on the economic side, it's, we know better, but we aren't subject to the same. We know better. We're going to apply our experience and our understanding, and we're going to come up with the way it works. But the legislators have insulated themselves through the raises and the other things that they do for themselves, have insulated themselves from what affects the bulk of Alaskans, what affects 80% of Alaska families. So they're operating on on their experience level, the impact on them that doesn't reflect the way it impacts ordinary Alaskans. And and we get stuff like out-migration. My God, why do we have out-migration? Oh, it must be because the government hasn't spent enough money in this area or that area. No, it's because we're taking money out of the pockets of those Alaskans, of middle and lower income Alaskans that are leaving the state. We're taking money. We're affecting their economics. Oh, no, but it's because we don't have childcare for them, or we don't have this, or we don't have that. It's Julie Colomb. I mean, it's because we have to have childcare. That will solve out migration. No, it won't. But that's her experience, and she doesn't have the experience of paychecks. I mean, day-to-day living on day-to-day income and looking at the PFD as a part of her income.
No, you're 100% right. And unfortunately, I mean, I don't know how to fix all that. I don't know how to fix this mindset in the legislature that instead of taking a blueprint from somebody else who's done something similar and modifying it and using it for ourselves and saying, hey, look, that's a great idea. Let's steal that and make it our own. It is, let's build it from the ground up, from scratch, and completely ignore anybody else who's ever done anything else, because we know better than anybody else how to make this happen. I mean, that's the madness that we're facing in this situation.
And I don't know. Maybe we never get out of this. Maybe through a combination of eliminating campaign finance limits and giving them enough salary that they don't have to worry about ordinary common stuff. Maybe we've set ourselves up where where our legislature never reflects what is in the best interest of the bulk of Alaskans.
It's Stedmanomics. Colleen Sullivan Leonard said. Yeah, I mean, these guys are convinced that they're the smartest people in the room and that nobody else could have possibly done it better than they have. And so they're going to do it. All right, Brad, final thoughts here, last minute. Final thoughts on where we're going and what happens this legislative session.
I think the most important thing, if anybody's listening on this, I think the most important thing this session is don't go by the 10-year, the Department of Revenue's spring forecast. Go by historical average. 68 is probably close to the historical average right now. 10-year average, 10-year moving average. So I wouldn't get hugely upset about that. But there's going to be pressures to spend more. Shit, we're seeing a school bill out there, right? I mean, increase the BSA, or there's going to be pressures to increase spending. Don't use the spring forecast.
Yeah, another $160 million, which would mean we would spend over $350 million increase in 2 years on schools, and forever, in perpetuity, until we're done. It's dude, it's madness. It's just total madness. All right, Brad Keithley, thank you so much, my friend. As always, it's great to talk with you. We will catch you next week, okay?
Michael, thanks as always for having me.
All right, we appreciate you. All right, Brad Keithley, we're out of time. We got to go. Hour 2 is right now.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. It's the Tuesday edition of the Big Radio Show. We just finished up with Brad Keithley for Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. And again, we came back to we've come back to the quandary, to the main problem of what we're dealing with here in the state. We're going to get into that here in just a second. Quick weather update from around the state right now. Still 4 degrees in Anchorage. And what is it looking like here in beautiful downtown Homer? Actually, up on top of the zero degree. It's dropped 2 degrees. Oh no, it's 2 degrees in Anchorage too. So the temperature's chilling out, just a little bit cooler. We've got cold weather advisories for the Kenai Peninsula, the lower Kenai Peninsula, including the southern Kenai and Prince William Sound, Homer, Seldovia, Seward, Whittier, and Valdez. Wind chills 10 to 20 below expected until 1 p.m. tomorrow. 1 p.m. Thursday. And strongest winds expected tonight and going into tomorrow with wind gusts as high as 35 miles per hour on the Ketchimak Bay. The upper Matsu, northern Matsu, including the northern Susitna and northern Copper Valley and the Tok Cutoff, very cold winds, 40 to 50 below in wind chill. And it's going to happen over the next few days, and expect the coldest wind chills during late night and early mornings, with temperatures warming up during the daytime. So a little cool, a little breezy. I saw 0 degrees up there in 0 to 5 below up there in the Matsu, and 20 to 25 below in Fairbanks. So it's a little bit of chill. I mean, I'm trying to be positive. It's going to go away. The spring is eventually going to get here. It's going to happen. We were just finishing up with Brad. When this comes to me from time to time as I look at it, and I realize, this is the whole problem with the legislature. The whole problem with the legislature always has to do with the mindset of, we know better than you, ... That's really, it's what we've called on this program for years, the politician's disease. Yep. It's the politician's disease of, we know better than you how to run a budget. We know better than you how to spend your money. We know better than you how to raise your kids. We know better than you how to, and it seems like almost every politician, not all of them, but a vast majority of them, have this to some degree or another. And this whole point of the budgeting crisis. Again, we're not talking about this Paul Seaton syndrome. Thank you. Harold. Actually, something I can agree with. There was the Paul Seaton syndrome of where he sits in front of something for 4 hours, has all this testimony about people who don't want the legislature to do something, and at the end of the testimony and everything else, he gets up and says, "Well, I hear what you're saying, but you guys just don't understand, and we're going to do something different anyway." Right? You guys just don't understand because we understand this better than you. It's Stedmanomics. It's the same kind of thing from the walrus. It's the same kind of feeling that he has.
That's just BS.
I know, Bert. I know. It's tough, right? But the problem is this. We're not operating in a vacuum. We're not just saying we think this is what's happening. This is what happened. Go back to the budgets in 2012 and 2013 when Sean Parnell was governor. And he's working on a budget. They've got the revenue forecast that come out and says, "Oh man, it's going to be high cotton season. It's going to be high cotton season. We're going to have $105 a barrel oil. Let's do it." And he starts to build a budget. Now, unfortunately, the oil prices immediately crater and it goes down into the high 70s somewhere. It was 78, 79, somewhere like that. And he's still building a budget based on $105 a barrel oil. And that, of course, was the first year where we ended up with multi-billion-dollar deficits. And that was the first draw out of the SBR and then onto the CBR and everything else, where over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, we spent $15 billion out of savings to balance the budget. Because nobody could look at it and go, maybe we should start basing this on something a little different than just the wild ass guesses that the Department of Revenue is making. Right? Maybe we should look at what other states are doing, like Oklahoma and New Mexico and Montana and Wyoming, and maybe we should look at for their revenues in that regard instead of just guessing where we're at. Maybe we should do something different. And again, this legislature has a complete and total inability to look at other places and see how did they address this issue. And if they were successful in addressing this issue, how did they do it? Again, a case in point that I've used several times now is the Alaska Reads Act. That went on in Mississippi. It had a very large success. It had a very visible success rate. And so, people like Shelley Hughes said, okay, well, let's bring that to Alaska because we're having some of the same problems. Let's bring it to Alaska. And it takes 6 years for that to be finally implemented and kicking and screaming all the way on this. And see, this is my problem. This is the nature of government. That government is not the quotes, right? Government is the problem. I follow a guy named James Hackman, and he writes for Shift Sovereign. It used to be called Sovereign Man. Now it's Shift Sovereign. And it has to do with investment and monies and everything else. But he always has an interesting take from James Hickman. And he's got he has a piece out here that says 29% of Americans have finally figured out the problem. Only 71% to go. A new Gallup poll finds that 29% of Americans now say the government itself is the country's biggest problem. That's a higher percentage than people who think that the problem is the economy or immigration or inflation. I mean, institutions whose entire job is to solve problem has become, in the eyes of 29% of the public, the biggest problem of all. He goes on to talk about Joseph Tainter, who wrote about this phenomenon in his book, The Collapse of Complex Societies from 1988. He said, Tainter studies empires from Rome to the Maya and found the same pattern every time. As societies grow, they create layers of bureaucracy and complexity to solve problems. Eventually, the bureaucracy becomes so bloated and expensive that it stops solving anything and starts generating new problems instead. And you can already see it playing out right now in real time. Rather than address why is it failing to solve problems with a $5 trillion budget that it already collects, a growing number of politicians simply want to extract more wealth from people who create it. You got Bernie Sanders and the Make Billionaires Pay the Fair Share Act, a 5% annual wealth on Americans. They're billionaires, right? The 930-something billionaires that are out there, which would estimate, which they say would raise about $4.4 trillion over 10 years. That's only $440 billion a year, by the way, which sounds like a lot until you remember that the federal government itself is running a $2 trillion deficit every single year. And Bernie Sanders' new tax act, which would tax everybody, it wouldn't even cover a quarter of it. And that's, by the way, that's the best case scenario. That assumes that no billionaire decides to become an expat and leave the country, that they don't take their capital or their businesses or just flee to somewhere else. I mean, look at what just happened in Britain. I don't know if anybody's been following this, and I know I say focus on Alaska stuff, but even I have been paying attention to some of these things. The English government just abolished its 110-year-old non-dom tax regime. That's non-domestic. The result is that over 10,000 millionaires left the country, and they actually made less tax revenue than because they said, we're going to do this, we're going to tax them, we're going to get all that money. 10,000 millionaires left the country, and their revenues actually fell. So what do you do then? Again, they know better than you. They know how to spend this money better than you. The federal government, again, collects $5 trillion a year in tax revenue. The problem has never been insufficient taxation. It's the same problem here in the state of Alaska. Well, it's a revenue problem. If we could just get our revenue back. It's a spending addiction. It's a spending addiction. And it's catching, right? We've seen the same thing in Congress. The entire federal budget in 2019 was $4.4 trillion. If Congress had simply held spending at that level, the government would have posted an $800 billion surplus last year. Even adjusted for inflation, they would have broken even without making a single spending cut. Instead, spending surged since 2019, 59% to over $7 trillion. And Alaska is just monkey see, monkey do. He goes on to say in the end of this article, this is what late-stage institutional decay looks like. Not a dramatic collapse, but a slow, grinding loss of competence and legitimacy, where the government's primary function shifts from solving problems to perpetuating itself. I mean, folks, this is exactly the problem that we're facing in this country and in this state. They know better than us. They couldn't possibly learn from anybody else. They will reinvent the wheel and make it up on their own so that they can pound their chest later and say, look at what we did. The problem is we never get to that point where they've solved the problem themselves. It always just either delays it or exacerbates it. I mean, why are we keep doing the thing? This bill from Kathy Giessel, where all of a sudden she's going to all of a sudden the legislature is going to be in charge of the LNG line, because that makes total sense. That, I mean, they've done such a bang up job with everything else. I mean, they've just, so we're going to give it all to the political machinations of the legislature, because I'm sure that will ensure outside investment on a gas line, etc. I mean, this is the thing. We've created so many hurdles, and we've created such a unique sized bureaucracy in everything that we do that we're just, here we are. Here we are. We've created all these hurdles, and the nature of the bureaucracy is to perpetuate itself and justify its own position. And so we just get more of the same. It's very frustrating to watch, but we can see it. We can see it in nature. But people are finally waking up. 29% now saying that, it's not economics, it's not in immigration, it is government. Government is the problem. That's where we're at right now. All right, we got to go. We're going to continue here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Chris Story is going to come in next and talk with us about the fair tax. We're going to get an update on that before he works his way over to the weekly life coaching lesson. We'll return in just a moment. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes on Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. I see Chris Story is hanging out in the green room. We're going to be with him here in just a second. And see what's going on. Let's see. Tomorrow, 5:00, public testimony. I'm going through here to see what else you guys have to say. The government is not your friend, says Renee. I mean, the state is not your friend. The government, the institution of the state is not your friend. Let's see, the trickle-down idea. We live in a very regulated society where under the delusion regulation is the solution. At issue is who's making the regulation. It's called regulatory capture. We stupidly believe the government can regulate without understanding who is making the regulations. Yeah. Imagine the state of Alaska going to a financial institution to look for financing for the pipeline. Bankers take a look at the state of Alaska's book and the track record of managing projects successfully and promptly show the state the door. That's 100% right there. Okay. I guess we'll get into this with our friend, Mr. Story, because we can. Let's jump into this here and see if he's ready and available, shall we? And do that, and nope, we'll do that, and I'll push this button and he'll be here. Hello, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. Fantastic. And yourself?
I'm just on top of the world. Little 0 degree weather happening up here on top of the hill. How about you down there?
I don't know exactly what the temperature is down here. It's cold, and what a gorgeous moon. It's almost like a blood moon. Just absolutely gorgeous. That's the only reason I know it's 7 degrees is what it's saying. Feels like -11 though, and I'll contest, or I'll say yes, I believe that, because when I stepped outside to take a photograph of that beautiful moon, it was cold. I wish I had put on pants, Michael.
Yeah, well, we all wish you to put on pants. That's the worst part.
Especially the neighbors.
That'll be on YouTube next week. All right. So Chris, we're going to dive into this we're going to dive into this on the Fair Tax Act. Have you been following Michael Bowles up in the assembly member up in the Mat-Su?
No, I'm not familiar with him.
So he is working on eliminating property taxes altogether and moving it to a sales tax in the Mat-Su.
Interesting.
And so it's
I'm under the impression they already have a sales tax, don't they? Is this like an additional sales tax?
There is no borough sales tax in the Mat-Su. The city of Wasilla has a sales tax, and the city of Palmer have a sales tax, but the borough itself does not. And so his suggestion is that they have a 6% sales tax across the board, and eliminate the property tax, which, I mean, again, I'm a huge fan of. But I don't know if you've had a chance to talk or see that or not. But
nope, I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, it all seems like a lot of people are thinking kind of the same thing along the same veins. You know what I mean? That all this money being attached to our one major asset is part of the problem, right? I mean, that's kind of where we're at right now. Is that?
I think it's a constitutional question. Like it seems, absolutely. And all I'm looking to do is, while not revoke property taxes altogether, is just try to make them fair, more fair,
Right.
if there is such a thing. So it's. Have you heard of this book called The 1% Solution by Ed Thurston?
I have heard of the book.
Okay, I just got it. The publisher just sent me a copy of it. The subtitle is How a Transaction Tax and a Sovereign Wealth Fund Can End Debt, Restore Trust, and Fund America Forever. So I reached out to the author after I got the book. I haven't quite finished it yet, but I'm going to have him as a guest. Really interesting idea.
Yeah.
And obviously, with Alaska being a sovereign wealth fund, which is constantly under attack by the government and our representatives, it'll be kind of a fun conversation, and maybe one you want to have with him as well. I'll loan you the book when I'm done with it if you want it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's hold the ball here. We're going to get to it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show, not your daddy. Wait, sorry, not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew, I was scared for a second. Thought we were doing an Epstein thing there. Here's Michael Dukes.
And we're back. The Michael Duke Show, not your daddy's talk radio. No. All right. Chris Story joins us from Homer. You can find him at ilovehomeralaska.com. He wears a lot of different hats. He's an author. He's a radio show host. He's a potter. He's also a realtor. And he's the author and genesis behind the Fair Tax Act, which is an act that would create a California Proposition 13 style tax in the state of Alaska, where we wouldn't be taxed on unrealized gains, which is essentially what property taxes do to you. You get taxed on unrealized gains. And he's been working on this for over a year now, I think. And so we're going to get some updates from him and see what's going on with it and talk a little bit about property taxes overall. And let's get to it. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. And it didn't start out, it's interesting. It started out as very local because, I mean, my whole philosophy or ethos, if you will, to sound pedantic, is to say backyard millionaire, to create wealth where you are, to create change where you are with what you've got as local as possible. Shop local, invest local.
Economics, right?
Be local.
Yeah. Local.
Yes, exactly. Like Cocoa Puffs. And so that's where we started with the borough, but the borough assembly, so there was an assemblyman, James Baisden, who took up the cause with me and said, yeah, let's do something about it. And then, of course, we learned very quickly, you can't. It's Title 29, state statute Title 29, that dictates what municipal governments will and shall, how they tax. And so, okay, fine. So we then create an amendment to, or what would be an act that would change Title 29 to allow for it to become more fair. Not completely eliminate it, but at least create a more fair tax. And this act would do a few things that you and I've talked about a lot. But just to recap, it would eliminate, as you just said, taxation on unrealized gains. And not to make this about the national politics, but I did wake up after President Trump was elected and watched America reject Kamala Harris's campaign completely and resoundingly. And one of the planks of her campaign was to tax unrealized gains in the stock market, in the capital market. And all of a sudden, even her most ardent supporters said, well, that's stupid.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen. You can't tax unrealized gains in the stock market. And then I said, Chris, why are we taxing unrealized gains every day in your market, in your home. We're reaching into your pocket every single day, every year, and taxing what you haven't yet earned, but we speculate you might have, or we conclude, based on this black box methodology with which we determine, absent a buyer, fair market value, which is counterintuitive and completely antithetical to its own definition, we're going to tax you on what we perceive your net worth to be, even though you've not earned or realized it. And I said, this is ridiculous. We've got to stop that. And so that's been the ultimate effort of this. HB 254 doesn't do that. That's essentially Mayor McChickey's, what do you call it, a resolution, whatever they passed through the assembly at the behest of Mayor McChickey, right, to create a 5% cap.
Yeah, that's a cap. It's not, it's not what you're talking about.
Oh, it's a cap that has one of those little propellers on top. That's about how silly it is, because it also allows for a readjustment of your assessed value based on new information. I'm sorry, what is new information? Everything. Oh, it's Wednesday. That's new information. Oh, we have comparable sales that indicate your home is worth more. That's new information. Oh, we see that you painted your front door blue. That's new information. So it's really, that's dead on arrival. As far as I can tell, our legislative affairs committee for the Alaska Association of Realtors believes that that's going nowhere. So I'm not putting energy into trying to amend that or even talk about it beyond what we just did. It's dead on arrival. We need to get back to the people's movement, which is to say, we need a fair tax. So we want to eliminate taxation on unrealized gains and roll back. It's not enough to just cap it right now. That's like saying gas gets to $5.50 a gallon. But tell you what, we're not going to go backward, but we won't go up as much as you think we might into the future. No, we want to roll back to about 2019 valuations prior to the pandemic, prior to a $7 trillion stimulation, artificial stimulation of the economy during those years. And it bolstered values in the assessor's mind such that we're being way overtaxed. So we can't go back to zero, but we could at least go back to 2019 pre-pandemic levels for base value of assessed values starting forward.
Right. So you put this together. You initially started it in the area, hoping you could do it at the borough level. You discovered you couldn't because of Title 29. So you helped draft and craft a new piece of legislation. I know you passed it over to Sarah Vance, and it is supposedly going through legal review. Where are we at with this right now?
This particular act that James and I and Mike Jones drafted is nowhere. It doesn't exist other than on my blog at ilovehomeralaska.com. So yeah, it's going nowhere. And I think I think maybe what the legal affairs or people in Juneau felt was more palatable, more maybe passable, maybe more realistic, whatever you want to call it, was what you see in HB 254. And so it's nothing to do. I've never seen any of the language. I've never touched the idea of a 5% cap. So that's like you say, I'm not criticizing anybody involved in that because it's something. It's just not. A, I don't think it's going to work. B, I think it's got a massive flaw in it. And C, it doesn't do anything to help our seniors, which is another component of what we call the Fair Tax Act, which is to say, once you reach 65 years of age and you have a primary residence, you are now tax free. You're done. We're never going to have senior citizens living under the threat of losing their home, I'm sorry, Michael, I know that you're very PC, to becoming unhoused as a result of their property being seized by the government for lack of and failure to pay their tax to the king.
Right. Well, and it's not like that's happening in a vacuum. There's actually people down here on the peninsula who are facing that, right? Who are elderly, who've lived here their whole lives, paid taxes their whole lives, and now have been or are on the verge of being unhoused because they can't afford to keep up with the property taxes that they've paid for years.
And or having to struggle to make certain decisions. And then there's just the concept of even if they're not struggling, because this is what's thrown back at me by a few, not a lot, but a few people say, well, look, I know a lot of senior citizens and they're doing pretty well. Like, this is the wealthiest generation. Come on, they can afford to pay. Should they pay? And let's say that they don't pay. Let's say we shut the spigot off to collecting property tax from our senior citizens. Where does that money go? By and large, it's spent locally. And what happens when it's spent locally? It's subject to sales tax. It's creating jobs, it's opportunities, it's our retailers and service providers are benefiting. So it's lubricating the economy. It doesn't just disappear from the economy. It actually probably quadruples itself within the economy far more than handing it over to somebody on Binkley Street in Soldotna to spend at their leisure and at their pleasure.
It's I mean, this is exactly, and like I said, I mentioned Prop 13 in California because this is exactly what California was facing, right? They were facing a forced out migration because people who had bought houses at, $250,000, their assessed value had gone up into the millions of dollars, and they'd lived there for 20 or 30 years, and they were unable to keep up with it. They couldn't do it anymore. And so that's where the genesis of Prop 13 came from. And we could be facing some of that. I mean, somebody said here on the program the other day, their assessed value went up almost 30%. Somebody said a $35,000 increase. I mean, we see that, and it does get to a point to where if you're retired and you're on a fixed income, it becomes nearly impossible to keep up with that if it just keeps ratcheting up and up and up and up.
And the current system is counterintuitive to actually helping the economy overall and property values in general from a fair market perspective, not taxation level. I'll give you, and I told the story before, and I love telling it, so I'll tell it again. I, for the first time ever in 2024, contested my property taxes. I've made phone calls and talked with the assessors before, but I actually filed an appeal on my own home in 2024. I've never done it before. I've helped people for 25 years do it and go through the process. I've just never done it myself. And I did. I was like, that's it. They've gone a bridge too far. This is too much. And I get a phone call from a very well-intentioned, arrogant assessor who says, well, we need to get into your house. And I said, no, I'm not contesting that I live in a hovel. I'm contesting the value is too high based on the metrics of the market, which I'm measuring and I have access to. I'm telling you, you've got it wrong. You've got it too high. Well, we need to come down and do a site inspection. I said, well, you can do it from the road. That's it. Like you can stand there and look at my house, but no, I'm not allowing you inside. That's not necessary and it's intrusive. And he says, okay. So he calls me afterwards and says, well, wow, I didn't realize you'd paved your driveway. Okay, we're going to have to, yeah, definitely we'll have to note that. Also, you built a really nice fence. That's a beautiful fence and a beautiful rock wall you built around your yard there. So that's, yeah. So look, it's not going to impact this year because, of course, we don't want it to look like, punishing you for that. But we will. So my taxes went up as a result of investing after-tax dollars that I earned into my own house, which created economy and jobs for those who provided those services, and I paid sales tax on it, and it just makes your head explode. We need to stop this, and the only way to do it is for the people to. You're not going to wait for the legislature. You cannot wait for a borough mayor. It's got to come from you and I. And I thought, well, who really wants to spend their Saturdays sitting down at Captain's Coffee, collecting signatures on, look, we can't even repeal ranked choice based on massive efforts statewide for signature collection and getting it to the ballot box. But I'm afraid that's what's going to have to be because there's not going to be a top-down solution.
Well, and you're going to have an immediate freak out from anybody who is a huge fan of government because how else will government collect their tax? I mean, this would be a huge, how could you do that? Well, don't think of the children, Chris, you greedy real estate, mogul. How dare you do this? Because think of the children, because if you locked in a house at the purchase price for 10 years, just think of all that lost revenue that could be made. I mean, again, this is what you're going to face in an initiative or a ballot measure kind of thing. It's the same. It's going to be the same kind of thing.
Undoubtedly. And I was listening to a Homer City Council meeting a couple years ago, and this was Mayor Ken Kasner, who was still the mayor. So it was, I think, 2 years ago, and we had a significant increase, and he had what he called his champions, I think. And so each council person was kind of championing something within the government. It was Ken's way of involving them at a deeper level. And one of the quote champions was talking about the significant increase to the city coffers relative to increased property taxes based on increased assessed values that had just been going up. This is during the pandemic years. And it was like a hockey stick, pretty significant. And they were talking about what to do with the money. And it was kind of exciting, what to do with this money. And I thought to myself, and I just wanted to reach through the radio, that's our money you're talking about. Now, what did we do? We just spent $650,000 for a town of 5,000 people to hire a firm out of Anchorage to review our comprehensive plan, and help us rewrite it. Help the little country bumpkin one-tooth wonders come together and come up with a plan for the future with some slick folks out of Anchorage. $650,000. I talked to a local provider of such services and said, couldn't you have helped facilitate that amongst the people? This person lives here in the community. I said, couldn't you have done that for a fraction of that? And the response is around $100,000. So we chose a firm out of Anchorage for an extra $550,000 because we had the money. But we have local providers that could have done it, and that money would have stayed in the community. Instead, we put it into a pipeline, a pneumatic tube, and sucked it all the way up to Anchorage, and then they came back with a plan for us little town folk. And that's just so insulting. Yeah. My point is, there's plenty of money to cut. There is plenty of expenses, and that's one little tiny town in the whole chasm of this idea. Is just that alone is just infuriating.
So what you're saying is this is basically going to have to go to a citizens initiative. This ballot measure to change Title 29 is going to have to go to citizens and make it, which is what they had to do in California. Again, Prop 13 was ballot Proposition 13. So that's what they had to do down there. Maybe we're going to have to do the same up here. All right. Well, thank you for the update, Chris. We're coming up on the next segment, and so we're going to try and finish it up with a little bit of lighter side. We'll bring Chris back on here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Chris Story continues with us here in the break as we wait for the next segment to come up. Tim says, sounds like a chainsaw idling in the background. Is the dog snoring again?
Yeah, in fact, it's a dog you've got. I just realized you've got that picture with me and Reagan. That's Reagan right there.
Yeah,
that is in fact him snoring.
I threw that up intentionally because I'm like, yeah, you got to know who the culprit is on that. You got to know who the culprit is on that deal right there. Yeah, I mean, Chris, this is just so frustrating to see that so many people have become inured to this idea that somehow property taxes are just well and just, and it's just the way we do things, and we should just keep doing it that way. But property taxes, I'm gonna chip in here with Donna Ardwin, who said in the chat room, property taxes are evil. I mean, you will never ever own your property. I mean, I know Ron DeSantis in Florida has been talking about this and moving towards trying to remove property taxes overall. I mean, I know it's the easiest way to track it, but personal property, your residence, I'm not saying commercial property or rental property. I'm just saying where you're not making money, the place where you just live, that should never be taxed. I mean, you'll never own anything otherwise.
Yeah. And people who are renting from me or anybody else that owns rental property, they're also paying property taxes. And that's the other side of this. The dirty little secret is that we have groups and you know, all manner of governments and grants being handed out to study housing affordability and what are we going to do. And I love to say this because during the Biden years, there was a Secretary of Housing called Fudge, Mrs. Fudge. Secretary Fudge came to Alaska with Senator Sullivan, and he towed her all around Alaska to show her how unaffordable it was, and all, of course, for an effort for not actually creating affordability, but maybe more subsidization or federal funds for housing subsidies. But the truth of it is, if we could take our foot off of the throttle of taxation, we landlords could relax rents as well. We have to take that into consideration when, be it commercial, my commercial rentals, or residential, when those tax assessed values go up and up and up, we have to commensurately raise the rents. And so everybody's participating in this, and it's just out of control.
Yeah. And again, it does a lot of harm. We're talking about the people who just can't afford on fixed incomes, whether they're elderly or not. I mean, on a fixed income or on a steady income, they can get priced right out of their house. And that's just, that's just astonishing to me that we can allow that to happen. And then people just go, well, that's just the way it is. We should well, that shouldn't be the way it is. That's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to change it. It shouldn't be the way it is.
And, to say that we're going to eliminate property taxes, wishful thinking, I don't know what that looks like. Some people are trying, great. Okay, let's put our heads together. But at the same time, at least what I'm proposing in the Fair Tax Act would just bring some common sense and some restrictions, putting up a couple of guardrails. That's it. It's not no tax. It's just putting up some guardrails. We're never going to be able to eliminate it's just not fair. In other words, to create fair market value and tax based on the hunch or guess of what that might be, that will never be fair. So we have to eliminate that. If we could just do that to where you pay $200, $300, $500 for your home, that's your tax value, unless you can prove it went down. To me, that's at least fair.
Yeah, no, it's fair and equitable. I really am following along what's going on in Florida, because I would love to see that here, where they have a residential exemption. You just get a residential exemption. That's what it is, flat out, period. If it's commercial property, that's a whole nother thing. If it's rental, commercial, whatever, that's a whole nother thing. But your primary residence, you should get a residential exemption for the whole thing, so that you don't get forced out of your home. Even these people who've paid on their homes and bought and paid them off, and lived there for 20, 30 years, and they still get forced out of their homes. That's just that, if you want to stay in your house and retire and die there, that should be your right. You shouldn't have it be forced out because the government decided that you owe more money. It's evil. I'm agreeing with Donna that it's evil. Period. All right, Chris, what is the what's your, let's change gears here, because I'm getting agitated. What is your topic for our positive mental attitude segment today?
Being Ben.
Being Ben, like old Ben, like gentle Ben, like Ben Franklin. All right, being Ben. All right, we'll get into that here. I'm going to put Chris back on hold for just a second. We're going to get ready to jump back into it. Folks, do me a favor. Would you like and share? And if you haven't liked it yet on YouTube, if you haven't subscribed on YouTube, and I know a lot of you are Facebook people and you love to be on, if you haven't done that, that would be great. If you would. If you have already, thank you. If you haven't, I realize that I'm getting close to my 1,000 subscriber mark, and I'd love to get there. So if you haven't yet, please help us out. Let's do that. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do this thing.
You don't look that excited that you're listening to the Michael Duke Show, but it's probably just because you got a bunch of Botox. Are you smiling? Blink twice if you need help. This is the Michael Duke Show.
Yep. Back to it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Chris Story continues with us. He's put on his positivity guru hat. He's going to give a little bit of life coaching today. And today he's going to tell us to live like Ben. I don't know what that means, but he's about to explain it to us. Mr. Story, what are we talking about today?
Being Ben. In other words, being Ben Franklin. Who was Ben Franklin? Ben Franklin was, long before he was on the $100 bill, or what do you like to call a hundy, Michael? I know that.
I call it a Benjamin.
He was a printer.
I just call it a Benjamin.
Oh, okay. That's so Gen X of you. So he was a printer. Before he was a founding father, he was a printer. He worked as an apprentice in a print shop. And then as a result of that, he became interested in writing. So he went from being just a printer to being a printer who also wrote, often with under a pseudonym, but he often was thinking things through and writing. And he was a writer who then became an inventor. And then he was an inventor who helped invent a country. We celebrate 250 years here of America. I think it's just good to look back at not just our founding, but at our founders and recognize they were just regular people. They were just people who took up a cause worth fighting for, that they deemed worth, in many cases, dying for, and granted us freedom, liberty, an effort towards a more perfect union, and one guarantee, only one guarantee: pursuit of happiness has never been benchmarked before in human history. We have the right for the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and religious freedom. All these things all came from just people being regular people who took up a cause. And I think today we put on a mantle, to be senator, you got to be somebody like Dan Sullivan with a law degree. You've got to be somebody that comes from a dynastic family like the Murkowskis, or even though we like him, the Begich family. I mean, it needn't be this way. We needn't have dynasties of Bushes in succession, one after another. Or Trumps, for that matter. No matter how you feel about that family, do we really need Don Jr. or Eric or Barron picking up the mantle? No, we need regular people to recognize you make a difference where you are with what you've got. You can help lead this country to what our next iteration is going to be. And you could be Ben.
You could be, Ben. You know, it's interesting because if you ever read about the founding fathers, Franklin, Jefferson, Adams, all those guys, I don't know about you, but I feel a little inadequate when I read about these guys because their lives, I mean, they were, workers, philosophers, inventors, alchemists. I mean, they did all kinds of different things. They were the true definition of Renaissance man. And sometimes I feel a little inadequate when I look at them and go, I could never do that. But that's not the mindset to have, right?
Exactly the point I'm making. Exactly. I remember saying one day I'm going to be, this is probably about 5 or 6 years ago. I said, I'm thinking about running for House. I think Mary Peltola was in, and I think, no, I think I'm going to make a run. I think I'm going to do, somebody's got to stand out. I'm going to do this. And ultimately I decided not to. But what I found interesting was a handful of people said, well, you don't have a law degree. You don't even have a college degree, dude. You have a GED. You can't do this. No. Oh, I can, and I would make an incredible lawmaker should you send me to Washington D.C.
Right.
But I chose not to. But my point is, what are you talking about? Anybody. We are a representative democracy by the people, of the people, for the people. It doesn't anywhere in our founding documents or in Ben Franklin's life. He didn't have a college degree. He was a self-taught, self-read individual who happened to have a lot of interests and no television. So he had more time. He didn't have to get through 6 seasons of Breaking Bad like I do. So,
right.
Obviously we're on our back foot, but at the same time, I just think that that's so important that we all recognize we could be Ben, we could be George, we could be literally the people that make the difference. Going back just briefly to our Fair Tax Act conversation, coming from, by, and of the people, we resolved that's probably how it's going to have to be. Great. We are capable of taking up that mantle. The individual American, whether you were born here or you emigrated here legally, then you've got the ability to, where you are right now, make a difference, as big or as little as you wish. But all I hope is that we recognize there wasn't something necessarily unique to them other than maybe the point in time with which they acted. But we have the ability. You're unique. You have the right to stand where you are and make a difference today. You could be Ben Franklin of your generation.
Right. And again, just to show that Chris doesn't have all the education he needs, we live in a constitutional republic, not a representational democracy. But we do use a democratic voting system to vote the people into the constitutional republic. But I got your point. The whole point was you don't have to be somebody fancy or great or have a degree or do anything else to be able to be part of our constitutional republic. You don't have to be. You can bring your own life, your own life choices and your own perspectives to these offices.
And thank you for demonstrating why you have to buy friends. I get that now. It's starting to make sense.
Funny. Checks in the mail, Chris.
Yes. So my simple mind just says you can be Ben Franklin. You can be anything you wish to be. Now, obviously, I'm not going to join the NBA or the NFL, but at the same time, I just think it's time to release that yoke of constraint that we have anointed ourselves to say, oh, I'm not enough. Yes, you are. You could go write a book. I remember interviewing an author, mid-level, fairly famous, got a pretty decent following, nationally speaking. And I said something, isn't it true that everybody's got a book in them? And she just reacted like I had thrown acid on the conversation. She's like, no, not anybody could do this. And I'm like, yes, you can. You have a book in you. You have an idea. You could start a blog. I love Greg Sarber's whole platform. He's got the Seward's Folly Substack.
Right.
This is a guy who saw something, said something, started writing into the Homer News till he was, it said, no, we don't need your opinions here anymore. And he said, okay. And he went and created his own blog, which now is viewed by more people than read the Homer News every week. So he has said, thank you very much. And he's become his own Ben Franklin.
No, exactly. I mean, there's nothing slowing you down except for you. That's the bottom line. Nothing is stopping you from spreading your wings and doing different things except for you. I like you I'm a high school graduate, right? I never graduated from college. I never did anything else, but I decided I wanted to do something important in my life and help shape things. And that's why I started doing radio. And it didn't require anybody's approval. I didn't look for anybody's approval. I decided to do it for myself. And look at where we are today. So, I mean, it can be done. Look at you, author, not just a realtor, not just a renowned powder, but also a great author as well of both fiction and nonfiction. It's amazing what you can do when you set your mind to it and you don't limit yourself. We got about a minute here, Chris.
Yeah, and if you want to read a great biography or listen to it on Audible, Walter Isaacson's Benjamin Franklin, and you'll realize he was a human being with many flaws. He was just a man who took up a great cause, and that helped become America. You can do the same. Everybody's got their own story, and if we're reading about yours in 100 years or 250 years, it might be pretty amazing too.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. So go out there and, I mean, you mentioned the TV, and it's funny because that kind of stuff sucks a lot of creativity out of us. I mean, I do enjoy it, but there are times when I'm like, there are other things I could be doing. And so it's just, again, it's a matter of priorities and what we need to do from there. Chris Story, the man from Homer. You can find him at ilovehomeralaska.com. Chris, as always, my friend, thank you for coming on board. We appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, folks, that's it for today. Tomorrow, hump day, middle of the week. We'll see you then. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. All right, my friends. Well, that does it for us. We are out of time. We will be back with more tomorrow. We hope you guys have a good one. We'll see you then.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.